Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. In this program today, we will discuss the issue of tracking of prominent Indians by Chinese firm linked to the Chinese government. A Chinese data firm linked to the Chinese government has been tracking at least 10,000 prominent Indian nationals, including President Ramnath Kovind and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, according to a media report. The tracking is part of hybrid warfare, the report says. The report comes in the midst of a military face-off in the Ladakh border, triggered by aggressive actions by the Chinese army. In the agenda today, we will discuss what this kind of action means and what could be its implications. We have with us cyber security expert Pawan Dugal and geopolitics expert Jitendra Kumar Oja. But before we start our conversation, let us have a look at this small report.
At least 10,000 prominent Indians, including President Ramnath Kovind, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, his ministerial colleagues, and leaders of all other parties have been under monitoring by a Chinese data firm linked to the Chinese government. This has been claimed in media reports which said the monitoring was being done over the last 2 years by the Zhenghua Data Information Technology Co. Limited. The list of those monitored includes prominent Indian business leaders, sports persons, and media persons. The company indulged in scraping information from the web and social media platforms, tracking research papers, articles, patents, and recruitment positions, the report said. The report is based on the metadata from the firm obtained through a network of researchers from a source connected to the company based in Shenzhen city in the Guangdong province, southeast China. The details also included data from the other countries. This activity by the Chinese company is said to be a part of the hybrid warfare, which means use of non-military measures to gain an edge over rivals. The reports assume significance as it comes at a time when India and China are engaged in a military face-off at the line of actual control in Ladakh. This standoff was triggered by Chinese transgressions detected in early May. The Chinese action is aimed at altering the LAC, but India has already taken appropriate steps to ensure that China does not succeed in its designs. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said in Parliament today that Indian forces are ready to meet any challenge and there will be no compromise on the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So India is determined to defeat evil designs of China, whether it will be military or through the cyberspace. Bureau Report.
So let's welcome our guest, Mr. Oja. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Thank you. So you must have come to know about this report, which says that about 10,000 prominent Indians across all across the spectrum have been tracked by a Chinese firm linked to the Chinese government. So how do you see this development, sir?
Look, it may have come in media recently, but those who are dealing with security and geopolitical matters, we were always convinced that something of this kind would be going on. You know, Chinese have a psyche, unique psyche. This hybrid warfare is not a new thing. Maybe technology and other things have come up recently, but if you go by the Chinese war theory, Sun Tzu's formula or his major theory, he talks about you must know your enemy and you must know yourself. And the quote is that if you know your enemy and yourself very well, you need not worry about the consequences of even hundreds of battles. So Chinese, if you see major wars they have fought, is not through bravery or chivalry or valor. It has been through a huge amount of deception and treachery and deceit and this kind of information. So earlier, you know, the means of espionage may be different. Now, because of technological advancement, these newer methods have come up and they are trying to gauge our preparedness, they are trying to gauge a lot of other things. And I'm convinced that it is not confined to this only. They must be running several subversive networks, either on their own or in collusion with Pakistanis or in collusion with organized criminal syndicates. And there are a lot of telltale signatures of this were there. I would not like to get into detail on my own, but as the discussion carries forward, in the larger interest of the country, we have to broach this issue at a public domain or a public platform like this, Ajayji. I appreciate that you have brought up such a sensitive matter and you want to bring it to the knowledge of Indian audience.
But Mr. Oja, what is very intriguing is it's understandable that if they are tracking our Prime Minister or Home Minister or Defense Minister or people in the military and security establishment. But it's intriguing to find that they are tracking even our sports persons. So what is the purpose of that?
No, even they are influential people. They also make impact because even sports persons, they carry agenda. It is possible that a lot of security and other experts may use sports persons to do or say something. So anybody who can make an impact will be useful. And this impact is not necessarily for security purpose alone. This could be for multiple purposes, for psychological warfare, for influencing public opinion, for subverting public opinion. So they would have done their homework very well, that who all are people who matter in public domain in India. If they are sports people, if they are cinema people, there are informal ways of maintaining contact, and when need is there, they will use them accordingly.
But can we call it snooping, since according to the report it is only scraping of whatever it is in public domain, maybe Facebook, social media posts, or maybe press statements and other activities which are in public domain anyway. So basically they are tracking that. So there is no indication of really getting into the private life or private conversation or so. So could there be something more?
Look, we have a very peculiar mindset even on national security, Ajayji. Our legal system is such that we always wait for evidence. And our enemy, which is fighting a covert war, is not likely to leave any evidence as such. It has to work through means of deception, deniability. So even by reading media, you can get to know a lot of things. Reading psyche of people, through media also you get to assess them. So what I'm trying to say is that even if detailed things are not there, going by the Chinese psyche, going by the mechanics of hybrid warfare, we have to be prepared that within the country also they would have been running clandestine syndicates. They have been taking help of even sections of subverted people, or even if not subverted people. You see, even in America, there's a lot of concern that sections of corporate sector, sections of lobbyists, etc., they're lobbying for the Chinese because dynamics of globalization and capital market, these create its own pressure. So what Chinese have been doing, in all democracies, we are likely to be most vulnerable, but even in other advanced democracies, they have created structures of support. And structures of support are for what purposes? For subverting policies of those countries. Australia has come out with a lot of reports. If you go through, even former Australian Prime Minister has been extremely worried. So in Australia, they have created a lot of infrastructure like this to virtually, what you can say, rob their natural resources. And they have been funding sections of people in politics, in NGO, in media, in civil society groups, and think tanks and academics, so that they can virtually paralyze policy of that country and continue to, extract resources from there. Same is the policy even in Africa. So, Chinese have a unique strategic psyche, and part of this strategic psyche is to understand your adversary. You have not asked me a question, but as part of this psyche, I want to tell you one thing, that Chinese have been a very defensive people. We mentioned earlier, they have not fought major wars. They were people who were building walls all around. But they kept on sending these kind of secretive missions and these kind of espionage missions, found out about their adversary, and with minimum use of force, they will prefer to fight a war. They will not fight a war if the cost is going to be heavy and they are going to suffer heavy casualty. So despite everything, they have expanded it through this strategy only.
So Mr. Oja, as far as you said that about knowing the adversary is concerned, India also must be carrying out activities to understand our adversaries, isn't it?
Well, I would not like to say or comment on this. I have no idea as such. But India is not a malicious power. India is not a deceitful power in any way. We are a democracy. and we always had a strategic problem. Our political leadership has been strategically not very, what should I say, very aggressive. Our most of, issues are internal. We have been far too caught up with internal conflicts and internal discords, and that's why I don't think our political leadership ever paid as much attention to find out about adversaries or about our friends. Maybe there were occasional, aberrations or occasional, enthusiasm that something has gone out. But China's nature of political system is such, it's very deceitful, it's very secretive, very racist, because they do not consider non-Han people as their equals. They defend, they believe that, they are at the center of the universe. So India does not have any of these psyches, especially our political establishment. And our bureaucracy, again, I would not like to comment much on that. I have my own views. We have most brilliant people in our bureaucracy, but our systems need to change. So I don't think strategically we have been that aggressive, or we can be deceitful in the Chinese way. But yes, we need to know our adversaries, and that is the problem. And most of the debates I see, even about China, is quite superficial, and there's very little effort to, go beyond how things are shaping up, in terms of facts on troops mobilization, number, etc. Very little study is being given to understand Chinese psyche and psyche of the CCP leadership. I don't think that we have been that aggressive, that penetrative at all.
Very true, very true. So now we are joined by Mr. Pawan Dugal, cyber security expert. Welcome to the program, Mr. Dugal.
Thank you.
So if I know you 30 years back, somebody from Campus Law Center. So
Mr. Dugal, I think Mr. Oja is there. He is, I think, addressing you.
Hi, sir.
Hi, Pawan. How are you?
Fine, sir. Good to connect with you.
Pleasure. We used to meet, run into each other in late 1980s.
Yes, exactly. The
From
world
JNU.
is small. World
Yes.
is indeed very small.
So let me ask Mr. Dugal. I will refer you to the report about 10,000 prominent Indians being monitored or tracked by the Chinese data firm. So how do you look at it?
Well, I see nothing surprising in the recent news that's come in of China monitoring more than 10,000 Indian political figures, important personalities, and influencers. The fact remains is that China has always considered targeting India by means of recognizing that India as a nation has had a historical lack of appropriate effective laws. China has well mapped the fact that India does not have a dedicated cyber security law, and that as a nation, India is only providing lip service to cyber security. China has also mapped up the fact that India does not have a dedicated data protection law. And in a scenario like this, they've gone ahead and sought to potentially target the Indian nation and the various data from various sources from the Indian nation. And it's ultimately this data that's becoming the raw material on the basis of which China is able to do analysis using machine learning and artificial intelligence and come up with key points which could potentially be misused against India, Indian national interests, as also Indian sovereignty, security, and integrity. So I believe that China has been working on this for quite some time. Historically speaking, when I look at it, the last 5 years has been full of activity as far as China's legislative development is concerned. In the last 5 years, it's got 3 dedicated laws having an impact upon cybersecurity. Its main legislation being the Chinese National Cybersecurity Law has come into effect from 1st of June 2017. It's a world leader on cybersecurity law jurisprudence. At the same time, it's targeted India, knowing fully well that there is absence of legal frameworks. So all these Chinese apps had been actually asking so much of more permissions from Indian users as compared to other international apps, and consequently were almost acting as digital people or digital agents of espionage, because they were constantly collecting data from Indians and sending them outside the territorial boundaries of India. Now with the Indian government banning first 59 Chinese apps, and then 118 second set of Chinese apps, the data flow that's going from the Indian app ecosystem to China has currently stopped. However, the data still flows from the Chinese mobile phones, which are extensively used in the country, by Chinese CCTV cameras and other equipments which are installed both within the government and outside within India. And on top of it, when it's now actually doing digital footprinting, it's only seeking to supplement their strategies by more effective wisdom and analysis of already available public domain information. China has well recognized the fact that a large chunk of Indian influencers or political leaders are not very tech savvy, and hence they are not much concerned on how their digital footprints can be potentially collated and the information that's going to be extracted therefrom by means of machine learning analysis could potentially be used to present a new picture of a new canvas of how India, Indian government, and Indian thought leadership, as also Indian policy making, is moving in a particular direction. So I believe it's a constant challenge. It's been happening for the last many years. It's surprising that it's taken an Indian Express to flag this off rather than it being flagged off by a governmental agency. But I believe that there's a lot of work that India needs to do in terms of not just coming up with dedicated new legal frameworks on cybersecurity, but in the interim also to come up with specific rules and regulations under Section 87 of the Information Technology Act 2000, so that the appropriate rights, duties and responsibilities of various stakeholders in the digital ecosystem could be potentially well encapsulated in writing. We need to be prepared for a future which is very uncertain. Indian critical information infrastructure is already under target. Already the Indian Nodal Agency on Cybersecurity, being the Computer Emergency Response Team of India, has predicted of a big imminent cyber attack targeting India based on phishing. So I think the learnings are very clear. The more India focuses on protecting and preserving cybersecurity of its digital ecosystem, the better it will do in the direction of serving India's national interests.
Okay, Mr. Dugal, as you just mentioned about cyber security laws are very weak in the country, and we have been talking about cyber vulnerabilities, but it has only been a talk. There has been nothing concrete has been done. In fact, some years back there was a fight about BlackBerry, the server being in Canada, and there was a lot of hue and cry. But we have not done the same thing with all these apps which were being operated by China. So where are the lacking points?
Well, I think the lacking is available on various elements. First and foremost, there's lack of political will in the direction of coming up with strong, dedicated cybersecurity legal frameworks. Because if there was a political will, India would have come up with a dedicated law on cybersecurity long time back. India would have learned from the experiences of China, of countries like Singapore, of Vietnam, of Macau, of Australia, and come up with dedicated strong legal provisions and legal frameworks, which we have not still come up to. The only thing that we did as a country was we came up with the National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. A good policy in 2013, it fell into misuse or disuse, primarily because it remained a mere paper tiger. Now the Prime Minister has announced that India will shortly be having a dedicated new cyber security strategy of 2020. But while the strategy is always welcome, but these kind of challenges are telling us that strategy is okay, but you really require specific actionable items to effectively implement your vision and strategy. And therefore, having in place appropriate legal mechanisms, in the interim coming up with rules and regulations under Indian cyber law, inculcating more awareness about adoption of cybersecurity as a way of life by governmental and private stakeholders, and ultimately creating a far bigger awareness amongst the ecosystem that look, we are all part of this huge chain of cybersecurity, and we are the links of this big chain, and it's our responsibility that we should not become the weakest link, because the chain is as strong as the weakest link. At a time where India has not even made up its mind on what it wants to do on data localization, I believe India has a lot of homework to do. You are a country of 1.3 billion people. You are generating data on a 24/7 basis. Your data is your biggest national asset, and your data is actually being exploited by all kinds of foreign service providers, intermediaries. Your data is going through servers in the US, thereby making your data amenable to the jurisdiction of American companies, American states, and American laws. I think India has just not done its homework properly. So the quicker we start waking up from our deep slumber, and the quicker we start crystallizing detailed legal frameworks, effectively implementing them, I think the better it will ultimately be. And finally, these scenarios like these are telling us that we will require a dedicated cyber army. You cannot say that, look, we will deal with these kinds of mechanisms on a knee-jerk reaction. You will have to be more proactive, more futuristic in your approach, in your perspectives, and in this regard, having in place a dedicated cyber army which can protect Indian sovereign interests in cyberspace on a 24/7 basis becomes an absolute crucial necessity of today's times.
Mr. Oja, Mr. Dugal raised a very good point about creating a cyber army. If we look at US-Russia relationship, we have seen reports about cyber system allegedly playing a big role in deciding who the president of USA will be. I mean, that fight is still going on, that they say Russia intervened and they influenced the voters and all that. So even after that, so is it that Indian establishment was maybe not, did not wake up that this can be a possibility?
There are two issues you are raising right now. One is, of course, cyber attack is a very accepted now or known form of warfare, and Chinese have created a massive army. This can again be used for two purposes. One is a routine commercial cyber espionage, which keeps on happening for commercial purposes. Secondly, they've also devised a very sophisticated capacity for cyber attack, not only on India, but on other countries as well. Even RAND Corporation has come out and assessed, the cyber warfare capacity of China, and they say in case of a confrontation, military confrontation, the cyber attack will be there simultaneously, because normally the assumption right now in security and geopolitical matters is that an attack in virtual world is also as good as an attack on like an armed attack. They can paralyze your systems. And one way you mentioned that like in US, they just want to interfere with their decision making and other mechanisms. So this is one thing I wanted to mention. Secondly, it's not that the problem is lying only with the cyber dimension. Most of our institutions are underperforming. Look, no institution of excellence can sustain for too long unless and until the ecosystem is not right, which our Honorable Prime Minister has been mentioning. And right ecosystem is an integrated institutional framework of governance, which we have not been talking about at all. 2-3 good institutions, 2-3 brilliant individuals, they cannot sustain. A country of this size needs an integrated framework of top quality institutions which are driven by meritocracy. Unthinkable. We are obsessed with our internal issues, internal agendas, and we have not allowed top quality institutions to come up. So this kind of, even if we build highly sophisticated cyber capacity, maybe for some time it can sustain, but it cannot flourish, because this is going to be sabotaged sooner or later, because rest of the systems are dysfunctional. I suppose the whole mechanism of warfare, its principles may remain same, but it has changed because of technological innovation and globalization. And compared to this, all our institutions are obsolete by a few decades, I must say. It's not that we were advanced at any point of time, but somehow we have not had, as I mentioned earlier, a strong strategic outlook, strong outward outlook. We have been inward-looking civilization, and that is why that is where we face our max problem. This kind of attack has come, and we are not fully prepared. Whereas Chinese is, they have a system that some people who are pursuing their India policy or pursuing their US policy, pursuing their policy in Africa, they are dedicated people, they are specialized people, they are experts in the area, and they have got it all concerned within a grid. They have managed to create a very coherent system, and because of that, internal systems are able to contain, they can afford to be aggressive, and whereas we are, exactly opposite, we are far. The problem comes, there is a need, like one we are facing now. In case of geopolitics and security, we say that, okay, conflict will come once in a lifetime, but constantly preparing for it, war mode, but you need to have agile institutions. None of the previous political establishment in last 2-3 decades, I have seen any strategic reform. Yes, tactical efficiency has gone up, but there is very little strategic initiative, and that is what really worries us.
Okay, let me turn to Mr. Dugal. We are running out of time. Maybe the last question. Do you agree with Mr. Oja's observation that we are underperforming, particularly as I mentioned about that US, Russia already have a tussle going on, that Russia was interfering through cyber systems and other systems being used. So how do you see that?
I completely endorse Mr. Oja's thought process, primarily because, as a country, we have not even woken up to what we should be doing. We've been also busy doing our other petty matters that we have begun to stop even realizing that any breach of cybersecurity could potentially impact the way the sovereignty of the country could potentially be exercised or enjoyed by the sovereign nation. I think with so much of now hybrid warfare going all over, it's important for India to come up with effective deterrent defense mechanisms to meet up with these hybrid warfare challenges that China is beginning to throw up. And mind you, this is only one. Fake news is already coming in a big way from China. On top of it, Indian critical information infrastructure is going to be on constant target and attack. So in this scenario, you see, my house is open from all the four corners. On top of it, it's rainy season and the roof is leaking. And I'm only trying to put band-aids on my roof, expecting that, the leakage of the rainwater will stop. It's not going to stop. We will need to come up with more holistic, pragmatic and proactive approaches that will need to be adopted by the Indian nation. Look, there's no to denying the fact that if we are going to be lax in this entire issue, then our sovereign interests in cyberspace are going to be prejudicially impacted. State and non-state actors are increasingly going to interfere in India's internal affairs. More significantly, it's also likely to have an impact upon public order and ultimately upon it could even have a prejudicial impact upon the sovereignty, security or integrity of India. So I think the first step has to be waking ourselves up from the deep slumber that we are already in. Number two, the second step is we have to avoid the ostrich approach, where we dig our heads in the sand and we just run away from reality. The reality is that China has made extensive preparations to target you. The reality is that Indian ecosystem is a leaking ecosystem. No problem. There's an old Indian saying, that the moment you wake up, let that be the morning of your day. Let's start waking up from now. Let's get these kind of cyber digital mapping exercises to be our wake-up calls so that the Indian nation can start coming up with cogent mechanisms and effective approaches to deal with these kinds of cyberspace challenges, because they are going to be here for a long, long period of time. So the quicker we start planning and the quicker we start protecting Indian interests in cyberspace as also in the actual world, the better it will ultimately be for the Indian nation, for the Indian ecosystem, for Indian citizens, and finally for Indian sovereignty, security and integrity.
So we need to wake up and devise a holistic strategic outlook so that we are safe. That is the view of both of our experts. Thank you both of you for participating in this debate. Thank
you.
This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.